Sorry for the delay, but we're here now. Um, so, Friday with Fred, we got a treat. Jody's going to join us. We'll see the practical stuff now. Um, Glad you're here and want to invite you as you log on and find out what's going on. Think about questions. Now, what I want to do first, though, like I normally do, is try to teach or share a little something that you'll find helpful for your homeschooling. And then we'll just take questions. I've got some that were sent in, and we'll see how it goes. So, I want to talk to you about uh, stress and being distressed and frustrated in life. And by the way, thanks for saying hi. Let me know, Heather. Good to see you. I know there's a delay, so we'll get there. But let me talk to you just a little bit about distress. So follow, in reflecting with me. So what happens with us when we get frustrated and distressed? There are really two mechanisms going on, but I just want to talk about one of them as relates to homeschooling. And it works like this. You and I have things we want. And those wants are what motivate us. So we want something, we know where we are, we don't have it. So we're motivated to get it, and we take effort and work on it. Um, and in doing that, orientation or pursuing what we desire, if we don't get what we desire, that's where the disappointment can happen and the distress. Now the problem is that most of what we do as humans, until we learn this, is we keep desiring things that we have no control over. So if you do that, if you desire to control something that you absolutely can't control, you have no control about you'll be stressed out about things you don't need to be stressed out about. Like when it rains and you're planning a picnic, does that stress you out? Well, you have no control over the rain. So if you're stressed about rain, you're not thinking clearly. You want to give up pretending you can control things that you can't control. I was talking to a lady not long ago who's going through a challenging divorce and struggles in life. It's all tough. And she has a similar thing. She's worried about the kids. She wants to try to still control the man who's divorcing her to behave a certain way so the kids won't be damaged. And I finally said, hey, why don't you just start putting resumes out and pick out his next wife for him? I mean, what she's like, how she'd work with the kids, what her personality like, what he really needs in a wife, and how it should go, and how she should treat your kids, and give him those resumes and even set up the appointments so he can interview them and see which one would be a good wife. Well, she laughed and I laughed because that's crazy. But that's the kind of stuff we do. And you get down to homeschooling and you think about, I want my kids to get in Harvard or maybe the state university or whatever. You can't exactly control that sort of thing. Or I want my kid to be an engineer or to be a rodeo clown. Doesn't matter. Whatever you've got for your kid, you really can't control that. I want them to be faithful in the church. Can't control that. What can you control? And what you can control are what's the work we do daily, right? What are the activities we have them involved with? What's required of them to learn? There are things inside of that game you can control, and you're going to find as they age, that list gets lower and lower. So this piece of wisdom that is slow for us to learn is to focus on the things we can control. Another example I like to use, this is business world, but a salesperson could be given a job of selling 1 million widgets in a year, let's say. Can a salesperson really guarantee control that they'll sell 1 million widgets? Nope, not possible. Can't predict all the moving parts for that would take. What you can do is you can control how many people you talk to every day or every week. You can control how you do a presentation. So I want to invite you, look at those things you can control. You might even want a list of all your desires and separate them into I can control and I can't control. And focus on the control list. That'll make all the difference. So that's kind of the pitch of some insight to invite you, whether you want to capture in the serenity prayer, the wisdom, know the difference, things like control or not, but more tuning into your own wants and desires and noticing, like paying attention to the fact that if you're wanting something that you can't control, it is a recipe for frustration. Maybe it happens, maybe it doesn't. So I want to conclude with a joke I heard some time ago, and I'm probably get in trouble for this, but I'm a big fan of Israel, and grew up. Closest family friends were Jewish. We used to go over there Christmas Eve, every Christmas Eve, and they'd give us presents for Hanukkah, Christmas, whatever it was. We were Protestants. So, but the story is told of a Jewish man who goes in the temple every week, and he's praying, or maybe every day, but he's praying, Lord, let me win the lottery. Lord, please, the one time, let me win the lottery. And he prays this and prays it, and the weeks go on. And one day in his frustration, he says, Lord, I don't understand. Why won't you let me win the lottery? And this booming voice comes out of the heavens and says, Eli, buy a ticket. And that's sort of where we are sometimes. We're wanting these things we can't control, and we're not doing the basic things we can. So in your homeschooling, that's where the focus needs to be. All right. Hope that was helpful or fun. Jody's going to be here in a minute. But what I need you to do now is throw me your questions. Could be a question a friend had, a question you think's answered before, question on your mind. Could be with parenting, homeschooling. I'm kind of open to everything. Probably don't want to give financial advice, but otherwise I think we're fine. All right. So Jody's sneaking in here. So you can say hi to everybody.
Hey, sorry I haven't been here before. Seems like I'm always booked something on top of this. But today's appointment canceled.
Yeah. So there we go. So we're looking for questions. And I do have one that was actually a couple I've seen. We'll take this short one first. I was just explaining that you want to learn how not to desire things you can't control. How crazy that makes us all. Yeah. So here's one I saw on YouTube, a response to one of our videos. Hi, thank you for your advice, help. Have you, like you said, you won't be like those you don't hang around. True. Would you recommend pulling your kids from certain extracurricular activities if character is lacking and your children start to mimic the I didn't get the rest of it. The behavior of others. Let's go with that. Yeah. So I mean, it's really a good question. I remember when I was first heard anything about homeschooling, a friend of mine, he had 3 boys, and he said, what we noticed about homeschooling when we pulled them out, I think it was in middle school or junior high, whatever you call it nowadays. And he said the amazing thing is they get in 7th grade, 8th, right in there, and these boys, he wouldn't comment on girls, but these boys developed what he called the attitude. And they'd come home snarky and irritated and defiant. And he said, once we homeschooled, that started going away. So this is kind of tricky because you don't want them around bad influences. And I would say this is even friends that you encourage them to be with or not. By the same token, you also can't really control them all their lives. So kids have to start, as they grow in age, they have to figure some of these pieces out for themselves. But I would say, you make this a clear issue. And if the character is really bad, I mean, I think if they're a bunch of hoodlums in a scout troop for our boys, I think we would have gotten another troop. Yeah. What we tended to do is try to get them to just go ahead and become the leaders and lead somewhere. One of the tricks we learned, I don't know where we stumbled over this, but the boys asked me, the friends would say, hey, let's go do this dumb, evil thing, and our guys would get to where they'd say, oh, come on, you know better than that. And pretty much without fail, the other guys would go, yeah, and not do it. So if they're developing leadership character, they can be an influence, but the leverage is in the direction towards the bad. So it's a judgment call.
Well,
And
I think you would, you can always pull them out. That's kind of the last thing. So try some other things first. Just even explaining to them. I'm assuming these are a little bit older kids, but just hey, do you see this happening with you? Do you see this as your attitude's not good? You're mimicking, is that what you want to be? Is that the kind of person you want to be? And just kind of go with some things like that, with the idea you can always pull them out if it's really bad.
Yeah, they've got to learn to process it themselves.
Yeah.
All right, cool. So in preparing for 8th grade, Heather says, we're doing Saxon math, which is what we used, reading and planning on purchasing your writing class. Good. And are there any other classes that you would add to set up her for success her freshman year? So first, I think you're going to want to make sure you know where she is. She's bright and she does fine, but if she's missing anything in math, I'm not sure what the background is, so I don't really know. Maybe the 8th grade is something. We didn't think in terms of freshman years. We really didn't think in terms of years. We just thought in terms of continuing to learn, continue to get educated, and they did school during the summer too, so they tended to be ahead of everybody anyway. So we did grades with church because of the way the divisions work with classes and such. We were kind of stuck there, but roughly it wasn't the way we thought. But I would say essential is going to be reading, writing, and math. And so if you got math and you've got a writing class, or in basically a daily routine of writing, 2 or 3 pages a day, depending on where they are this age for sure, and give them proper feedback, I think you're golden along with the reading. What I do with the reading is make sure you get a good reading kind of curriculum strategy, but I think it's wise to fit in books that you think are of value, things you've read, things maybe sometimes that are out there in the culture that you want to discuss with them. We've mentioned before, we like to get all the kids to go through E.D. Hirsch's cultural literacy series. You probably find it at your library. And even if they're 8th grade, read the kindergarten, 1st grade. It won't take them long, but it gives you some language about what the culture is about. It's a little dated. It may have updated versions, but it's still all in the culture. We're all still saying similar things. We're just adding things in terms of understanding the nuance in the language. But in particular, I would say what you're wanting to do is make sure you've got a goal of how many problems they do and amount of time that they can do them in. And so a number of pages to read and amount of time they need to read. So they need to learn to focus that way. If they don't get finished, that'll be homework later in the afternoon. You have a limit on time, stop. Number of pages, stop. If they didn't read them all, they're going to have to read later. And they'll learn to stay within that range if you're fair. Anything you're thinking?
I'm going to add that if this child wants to go to college, or y'all are thinking about that, now's kind of the time to see what the basic requirements of getting in would be, just to fit into your curriculum in different ways. It doesn't even have to be, it can be she needs so many history credits. Well, then make that part of a reading plan.
Yeah. So the way we did it was basically sat down and figured out, what do they call that?
Scope and sequence?
Well, it is a scope and sequence, but your final transcript, basically.
Oh, yeah, the transcript. Yeah.
So your transcript, we actually just figured out when you graduate, you've done this, 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 and then we could reorganize what we were doing, especially around the books they read. So and somewhat in the sciences, depending on, we did it where they learned calculus and they did physics and they did chemistry and then biology. 2 of the kids got really behind in the math, and that wasn't going to be their thing. So we found exposure to, we have found books on the same thing, but they didn't get through calculus, but they still had good exposure to principles of physics, principles of chemistry.
Basic, yeah.
Well, basic and a little more advanced. I mean, they had some math. It wasn't, just this is a cell,
Okay.
So it's that kind of thing. But that'd be the thing. And for the most part, what you're trying to do with the child, I think this is really important. Success for freshman year. Look, success is learning the skill of teaching yourself how to learn. That's success. Education's a skill game, not a knowledge game. Knowledge is a byproduct, and you do acquire knowledge. But if you have the skill to acquire knowledge, you can grab that knowledge whenever you need it in the future. So it's much more about the skill rather than what they know. They get out and don't know all the capitals of states. Ours didn't. I don't know them now. But I'll tell you what, if I need to know, if any of y'all would pay me, let's say, I don't know, pay me $3,000. I'll learn all the states, capitals, population of the states overnight because I know how to do it. Right? But I don't need it. So
Goodness.
maybe $2,000. Anyway. All right. Good question. So let's see if I can keep going with these. Hey, Fred and Jody, I've got a couple of questions. Can you discuss how you guys handle memorization work in your homeschool? Other than math, what facts did you require your kids to memorize? Well, I'll go first. I wanted them to memorize basically the schedule and the rules of the home. Now, Jody, what about school?
We didn't do a lot of memorization. Memorization's great. They had a lot. All their growing up, they had a lot of Bible memory through programs they were involved in church. So they had that, and then at different times we had them memorize some poetry that we all did together. And but as far as just facts, whether it's math or anything, I don't know that we really.
I did take them through a memory course. I had not developed one at the time, and now we have one. So I wanted them to know principles of memorization. They were memorizing vocabulary.
But no, that's true. Yeah, just trying to think back here.
So how did you do vocabulary?
Well, we were using the Robinson curriculum, so they had the set vocabulary words, and after they had finished a book, there was a set of vocabulary words, and so instead of doing reading for the next few days, they used that time to work on memorizing the vocabulary, spelling the word, the spelling, and the definition of it, and then they would get tested on that. So I guess we have a little more.
Yeah, there was a good bit more, and so especially if you look at the classical model, so the data stage is up to around age 10-ish or so, and then the logic stage runs there, 11-ish through, I'd say, 14, and then on after they get a prefrontal cortex, communication, the rhetoric stage. So younger kids really love to memorize stuff. So, memorizing math facts, we did that, memorizing vocabulary, alternating in books, however that game worked, occasional poems, exercise that skill is fine. But I don't know if there's exact magic about it. We would have the kids, after they would read daily, in the later years especially, would get them to recount a summary of the story. So that's an engagement of memory. But memory, memory is key to IQ and learning and all thinking. So practicing is not bad. The memory tricks that you can learn with mnemonics can allow you to access and hold on to a pile more information. So it's a good practice. I don't know if there's an exact formula. I think, probably like vitamins, you just want to slip it in, sprinkle some flaxseed on their pancakes every now and then or something. Let's see. There's a question 2 here. If I can make this work. So Ken said, the second question has to do with Greek and Latin. At what age did you start working on the classical languages, and how did you go about it? Thanks. I think this would be mine. Do you remember?
Yeah, that was another memory thing. But you go for it.
Yeah. So, another memory thing. So at the very least, we would, with the kids, we really like them to learn Latin roots, because you learn a Latin root and it can give you anywhere from, I think it's 10 to 15 words. So you know how to break them down. So, and I constantly do that sort of thing. I took Latin in middle school up through high school, I guess. and Greek and Hebrew and English and Spanish. And don't test me on any of them. But, knowing things like confidence. So confidence is con and fide. Con is with and fide is faith. So with faith, and I'm not saying that's how you define it, but you get the flavor of some of the history of the word. And so being confident has something to do is having faith in what you're challenging or heading into. So it's really valuable with Greek and Latin. So I don't think they all did both. I'm trying to recall. It seems like Tripp did Latin. Maybe the first two did Latin. And then we shifted to Greek with the other three.
And I'm trying to remember what age they were.
Yeah, I do think they were a little older. And when I say older, maybe 12, 13, somewhere in there, 14, somewhere towards high school, where they mastered and could really understand, appreciate language. I have a gripe about language. So they always say, children can learn language faster than adults, but it's not true that I can tell. They're a little more pliable in how they can speak. But what happens is the way you teach children language is they're immersed in it. We just talk about it, and if they ask for something, they don't get it, they have to learn to say the right word. So it's an immersion game, which is what missionaries have figured out now. They just go and immerse in a culture and learn the language. What we did is we made it academic, and partly because Latin is a dead language, and technically New Testament Greek is kind of that way. We don't know exactly how to pronounce some things. And they're not speaking it. They do. The common Greek of today is similar to the Koine Greek of the past. But in all of these accounts, when you study grammar to try to understand it, to speak it, you're going in reverse. As Rudolf Flesch pointed out, y'all, we're all, by the time we study grammar, like English grammar, we already know it. We just don't know the words for it because we're using grammar all the time. We've learned the language. We're not saying Jody and me is doing okay today. Jody and I are doing okay, or maybe even well today. So that's a bit of the game. But what we did is just found a basic book of Latin. One of them may have been an online course. I can't remember how well that worked. Seems like Brooks did that. But because, and bear in mind, I'm a little fuzzy on it, only because I really wanted exposure. I wanted them to have a natural introduction. So it was like a full solid year, 2 years, 2 semesters, depending on how, they play that game, where they're really getting down some vocabulary, some sense of the grammar, can fiddle with translation a bit. So it's familiar to them. And that's how you have to do. You get familiar with it enough. And the key is vocabulary. And when you're familiar, then you can start playing with the language. With all our kids, anything they had a knack for, we would kind of feed. If somebody just loves language, let it do it all the way through. But some of that relates to what your goals might be. And I couldn't exactly get in my mind that all the kids were going to be language scholars. So we gave them good exposure and found materials that worked fine. But it was mostly a familiarization and then a deepening of vocabulary, as it were. It seems like somebody studied Spanish too.
Yes, a couple of them did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and some of that would be, depending on what they're doing, we wouldn't always force electives. They might want to do something. So it might be a study elective or, Holmes, especially with music, took violin, but then wanted drums and guitar, and all of them taught themselves. They could do keyboards and stuff like that. Had some piano lessons for a while. Anyway, I hope that helps. That's what I got for the moment. Let's see. Can't seem to post my full question. Chat features limiting. Oh. So I'm sorry. I'm trying to solve how this works. Just a sec, gang. Morning, happy. Thanks for your advice. We did this one. Yeah.
Yes.
So we got Kenneth and it shut it off. That's why we got to the second question. Got that. Second question. And now Heather said, thanks. Good. I'm glad that was a help. And I have a 10-year-old girl on the Robinson curriculum. I'm loving the substitution of Matt and Green Gables in for some of the Rover Boys and Tom Swift series. Do we do that?
We well, we did do the Anne of Green Gables series. I read them to all the kids, a good bit of them, and then really enjoyed it, kept going with it. So we didn't do a substitute issue, but yeah, we loved, my boys Trip loved Anne of Green Gables. So that's great.
Yeah, he liked
yeah.
High School Musical too. So.
No, that's terrific. Yeah, that's a great series.
Yeah, and that's what you do. You find things they can relate to. But then again, just like our boys they can read Anne of Green Gables, right? And the girls can read Rover Boys too. I mean, you can try to understand these two orientations in this crazy world. I like to refer to it as, my divisions are people with testosterone poisoning and people with estrogen poisoning. And that seems to work in the conversation. So, how a child who reacts before she thinks? Just one? She's constantly criticizing others, even me. She just loudly says whatever she's thinking and feeling. And
you'd like her to stop.
I got more. And I've talked with her about this. And I can't seem to post a full question. The chat features limiting characters. Well, we'll go back to this. And I'm guessing you'd like to see that change?
I'm pretty sure that's the...
Yeah. So let's frame it positively. I'd love to know how old she is, but sounds like a 12-year-old to me. You know, on a bell curve somewhere in there. Criticizing others, even me, she just loudly says whatever she's thinking or feeling. Yeah, so we have an emotions course. If you have it, that's what you want to go through, because it's trying to teach them how to run how they feel by running how they think, learning to direct the questions. So something was popping up. I was seeing if it was that chat feature. Yeah, she's 14. Perfect. Yeah, so 14 is great. Yeah, so this is the kind of stuff that you make lawyers out of. And if you want her to be a lawyer, what I can tell you, the way I understand it, that little book over Jody's shoulder, The Absolute Quickest Way to Help Your Child Change. If you have any of our stuff, it's in there, an ebook version. But I can tell you what's happening is it gets rewarded somehow. So she's constantly criticizing, even you. She's loudly says whatever she's thinking or feeling, and somehow it gets a rise or response out of you that is a reward in her mind. It's not a reward in your mind, but the way she looks at it. What are you thinking?
No, yeah, somehow. I was just thinking that one thing you could do is just catch her and go, okay, I heard what you just said. Now, can you tell me one positive thing about your sister? Or,
yeah,
I don't know.
I mean, well, here's the trick. She needs to learn. I mean, she's not going to get to be popular this way, but she may be analytical. And the analysis is good. I mean, the easiest thing to do is anybody that's analytical is pretty good at saying it both sides. So, you criticize, so name some positives too. I was taught this in a school by a guy named Norman Geisler, who's famous for apologetics. And he would always say, look, you want to explain what's good about the other view before you critique it. And I think that habit would be very helpful because it's still using analytical thinking without getting into, the rudeness part or the attack part. And, she's got to figure out, does she want relationships or does she just want to be right? Because she can be more tactful and more respectful. But sometimes you say things straight up and people don't like it. And that's kind of how you have to go. But I think the habit you're wanting, you don't have to look, you keep looking at me, but you don't have to.
I'm listening.
I'm thinking,
Keep going.
I'm thinking you've got an idea, like
okay,
you're going to wink at me and go,
going,
oh, I got one.
Keep going.
Maybe
we'll work this out.
Maybe
guys.
we need a conch shell that we could pass between us. But yeah, if you think about what gets rewarded gets done, what you want to do is reward her for for analyzing both the good and the bad. Look at other options. How they can go. I mean, like you can go through. We were on a cruise a week or so ago, and cruises are an easy opportunity to be critical of how large people are eating lots of food. Right? Perfect environment to be judgmental. But if you get in your mind, look, they're on a cruise, you don't know their story, you don't know what their struggles are. They may be healthier than you. It's their life. They have choices. Like, get the whole picture instead of putting yourself in the place of God and deciding how everything should be. Because this young lady is going to be really frustrated because she needs to listen to the first part of what I shared. You got to quit wanting things that you can't control. And that's like walking around criticizing everything. This is not her job. But some of this is a learning process. But I think I would just start at least with, hey, cowgirl, this is getting old. I'm in Texas. And what I'm going to want you to do is either learn to be quiet so the rest of us don't suffer, or share positive or another explanation besides just what you're criticizing, another way to interpret it. So you learn to really think both sides of the issue. I think I would start somewhere like somewhere like that.
Yeah, and I think it hits with the friendship too. And kind of golden rule, is that the way you want people to be treating you? So there's some character issues too that
That's a
can
really
get
good
into,
one. That golden rule thing we found to be great. It's just how you want to go through life. I mean, if she'd like to get online with me, as long as I got to memorize all the capitals and all, I'll take a little more money. And, I bet I could out critique her really like to the end of the earth. And, she needs to taste what it's like. But, picking on people is rarely the best way to go. It's more of a vision. What kind of person does she want to be? The more you can get her to think, how do you want to be treated? Well, if you really want to go through life that way, what person do you want to be in the future? Do you want to be a person that goes around criticizing everybody and everybody wants to stay away from you? Do you want friends? Do you want relationships? Get a little more targeted about the person you want to be, and then learn how to use this. I wouldn't dismiss this. This may be part of her strength and part of her talent. The problem is she's got to learn to wield it. Just because you are great with a sword, you don't have to go around accidentally cutting everybody with it. So there's the idea. Throws in another greedy for asking another question. Well, hopefully everybody's benefiting. I'm benefiting because I'm going, oh, glad we're not going through that. Phil Grady asking, but you were talking about having your kids read, study scientific material once their math levels were high enough to understand it. True. What were those texts in addition to regular 2 hours of reading? Yeah, so what we would do with those texts is we would, when they got to a level in math, we would probably I think what we did is cut back on the math. Like when they were through with calculus, they didn't have any math. Science was their math time.
Right.
Right.
The way we followed Robinson's curriculum with that. And so they went into physics, chemistry and physics, but they were books that the Robinson curriculum.
Right. But that was after they got to calculus. I was talking about, we had 2 kids that did not finish calculus. Right. So we did other things. So the way I would do it is, I don't know with a kid that is not gotten that math done, I wouldn't have them keep doing math somewhat all the way through. I'd keep wanting to advance their math until they were out of the house, if they hadn't gotten to calculus. Yeah. So I might divide it up. So I'd probably take some of the reading time and some of the math time and combine those to be the science time. So they might do an hour and a half, or let's just say, let's say they do an hour of math and maybe an hour of science. That could take in the math time. And that might be a really fine strategy, especially if you have enough advance inside of the math, like physics. If you got a book that doesn't have them do any formulas, about space, time, velocity, anything like that, probably not quite enough physics. It's more like an exposure, like a wiki article. It's probably not what you're wanting to to aim for. Anyway, hope that helps. Or you gave us an example. For example, her sister was telling us some information. I couldn't hear well and asked her to repeat. Well, this daughter spoke up and said, she just said that in a real snippy voice. So we're off physics and back to the critical spirit. Yeah, so in debating with people and interacting, one of the most powerful things you can do, there are two things. One is humor. Humor is great. If you can figure out how to laugh about things, you can disarm everybody. The other is actually to agree with them. So in this kind of situation, she just said that. You go, of course she just said it. Right? Great. I agree. You're exactly right. Good job. But I couldn't hear well, so I asked her to repeat it. I know she said it, but see, there's a whole process. I would explain to my kids. You send a message and you receive a message. And then once you receive it, you send some feedback back, which is sending a message, and then they got to receive it. And communication is all about first understand and be understood. First understand, then disagree. Yes, she just repeated it. I didn't hear it. Fault on me. Whip me with the wet noodle. I don't know what you want. But if you can go, yes, you're right. I promise you with this girl, if you just say, yes, you're right, she won't know how to process it. Just keep doing that. Yes, you're exactly right. Yeah, you're right. You got it. You're right. She'll probably get bored. You're right. And here's a little tweak. There's a little more information. Give me another example. This is joyous. I can get to it.
Oh, man.
All right. So I do have somebody wrote in a question I want to try to address as well. And I am open for another example if you give me one. But, the less you'll get defensive, the more you can laugh, the better off it is. And I'm not saying make a joke out of anything, but I'm saying you can certainly, even on questions like, do another couple of questions. No, that's right. Yeah. So even on questions, sorry, gang, even on questions like, she just said that, even, saying, yeah, I just wanted her to practice, even that's kind of crazy. You get off light, but if you can laugh about it, I mean, some of it is just, thank you so much for helping out with this observation. I remember us going, thank you, Junior Holy Spirit, because that was the Holy Spirit's job to convict us of this world. But, it doesn't have to be combative. It can be more playful. In fact, I would probably ask this daughter, I'd just say, look, you come across snippy and this and that, and I'd like to work with it. What do you want me to do? Like, why are you bringing this stuff up? And get into her mind and see if you can understand what's going on, because chances are maybe she wants attention. Maybe she wants the world just right. And maybe she gets to grow up and be one of these people that fixes the whole thing. That would be so awesome. We hug it out. That works well for us. Yeah, that might work. The problem is if they're still reacting, doing it afterwards, if hugging it out stops it, that'd be great. Hugging it out can resolve it, which is super, but it's kind of like long-term, you're wanting to develop in her the character of not doing that. And that's why I say, look, what's a positive? Ask me, so why did I ask it? Give me a reason that makes sense. You think I'm walking around just crazy going, huh? It's not that kind of game. We have things in our mind, noises, all the stuff. Jody, I do that all the time. I'm sorry I missed it. Please repeat. Sorry.
Yeah.
So let me post this long one I got here. Did I do this wrong? Yeah, thank you for the opportunity to pick your brain. Pick your brain. How this is, someone emailed this in and emails some of the, we don't always edit these things. 14-year-old female to dig deep and enjoy learning. It has been a struggle. We believe it all stems from us taking her out of public school. I've simply, as best I can, simplified things, I guess, as best I can. And it won't show the rest of it.
Is that all of it?
Yeah.
Okay.
So everybody can see it there. Good.
Okay.
I just can't. There we go. That's perfect.
She's following Robinson.
Yeah, read it.
Okay. Whoa. Where did it go? I follow the formula of 2 hours of math, 3 pages of writing, 2 hours of reading. I get almost nothing. I am deeply worried about her future. My boys do not have this issue. Saxon math is what we use, and she states she cannot learn that way. And I'm at a loss. She states she is a believer, but
Over here.
maybe.
But her
Okay.
behavior towards everyone is snarky and defensive. Is there any hope for her? We are strict. Video games are gone, no internet. She went to down the rabbit hole, I think it meant, of social media and chat rooms. You know what that means. No, she sees them and treating her better than her mother. Now she sees them, right?
The social media people give her good feedback, positiveness. Yeah.
Wow. Do you have any suggestions? I'm all ears. Yeah. So there are a lot of complications with this kind of thing. And part of it is most of us are really good at parenting 9-year-olds and are terrible at parenting 14-year-olds because we treat 14-year-olds like they're 9. And as children age, you've got to ease off on the control because they've got to have the freedom to mess up their life themselves. And I'm not saying that's what you want, but you can't control them. Go back to the first, 10 or 15 minutes of this talk where I talk about this exact thing. And so you're caught with a daughter. She's got to have some freedom. When we'd let them have some internet, some TV, we'd teach them to evaluate it. They could earn more TV internet time on the weekends when we did it by reading extra. We had ways to do that, but over controlling a child is a problem. The one advice I'd have here is I thought about it. My original thought is, yeah, you can learn any math. And I'd really want to know, are you requiring a number of problems per the time period? Are you requiring a number of pages? If you don't do that, if you just say read for 2 hours, but don't require a number of pages read, you're not really playing the game right. They'll just run their eyes over something or daydream or whatever. If you don't have a number of math problems to accomplish in the 2 hours or 1 hour and then grade them, you're not really helping them learn math. Those feedback loops are not measured, and you're going to get more of what you measure. So you got to have a real measurement, not just a time frame. What I would suggest on this one example is I think I'd call her bluff and say, okay, why don't you research out of math curricula out there and find one that we can look at. And if it makes sense, we'll get it for you. And you can do that curriculum. And if she learns it that way, because pride, or maybe it's a better curriculum, party on. She's learning math. If we discover that it's not the curriculum, then that gets to go away when we start thinking of how do we help them do it. With someone like this, if they're not learning math, I would really simplify the number of problems they're doing. And I might even have them repeat them. So let's just, wherever you're in math, we're just going to do this lesson again and again until you get 100. And then we'll do it again. That has a boredom factor in it, but that's part of the motivation. But you're also getting them to nail down how to do it. A lot of us just move too fast through math, and it's not how math works. Math, builds, and getting those basic principles down make it much easier to learn more complicated things. So a lot of kids need to go back in their math books, slow down, and catch themselves up, because the difficulties they're having are the fact that they don't have some basics, as it were, that were much earlier.
Yeah, I was thinking that too. Find out where she really is in math and what she might be missing. And if that's the problem, if that's the issue, it does sound like she has a kind of an overall attitude problem. And you say she writes 3 pages, but then it sounds like, does she really? I understand what you require, but I'm wondering, is she falling short on all the requirements? And are there consequences for that?
Right.
Or do we just go to the next day, the next day, the
right.
next day?
And again, is she getting the number of pages read, doing it in the afternoon? Does she have a number of problems? And if she doesn't get them done in the time period, she should do them in the afternoon. And is she getting good feedback on the 3 pages of writing?
And
But honestly, she probably needs something social. A lot of times there are kids that are just more oriented that way. So whether it's youth group, I mean, you're not going to be able to cage her. And I get the dangers that are out there, but there's some intermediate thing that you just don't want to over control a human being, because that kind of invites them. If you ever read Romans 7, it kind of the rule, the law invites a pushback. You know, if I push on Jody, see, even there, she's pushing back against me to stay in the picture. Our kids will do the same thing. And ultimately, they've got to live their own life and they've got to figure it out. It's just in the context of being in our home, we still have to have standards and boundaries on the game.
Well, yeah, I think that this is the thing, sweetie. You're going to do school. You're 14. You're going to do school. Do you want to make this hard on yourself or not? Maybe throw some carrots and sticks in there for a little while, just to get. I don't know how new she is to homeschool, but to get her in a routine and just, this is going to happen. We are going to do this.
Right.
I'd like it to be not torturous on you.
Right.
But that's kind of your decision.
I mean, quite frankly, you've already got some opportunity to say, look, we want to allow you back on the internet. We still got some boundaries on it. We got, you know, some fun things you might like to do, like Instagram or something that's safer than, you know, Snapchat or something like that. You can figure that out, but just basically say, look, you start doing well on the math, you know, we agree what that means, and you're going to get time on the weekends. So she has a payoff too, not just a negative. So that's a starter kit.
Yeah, some thoughts.
Did you guys back off during the summer at all? For instance, I'm debating requiring my kids do half lessons every day rather than the whole lessons. So what we did in the summer was what?
We did not back off. We got I think we started a little bit later, maybe 30 minutes later, maybe. I'm not even remember. But basically they did their stuff and they were through by 12 or 12:30, and they had the rest of the day. And if something was coming, if there was an event, all the kids are, you know, there's a birthday party or whatever, we flexed. Okay, well then you can go to that, but we're not going to just skip the day. We somehow maybe backed off that day or made up for it. We didn't just torture them to, you know.
Yeah,
but
so
most of the other kids were not even doing anything until they were sleeping in and
Yeah,
nothing was happening.
anything.
I don't think the kids were missing anything.
So here's some of the logic. Look, we don't take 3 months off from learning in life or work. I mean, I guess you can, but it's an ongoing process. And we found staying in the routine, you know, you take 3 months off math and you're going to have to spend the semester, like most of the books do, remembering what you thought you learned last spring. You're having to catch up. That didn't make sense to us. We did Saturdays, they only did math, and they could get out of math if they did a service project somewhere, pick up trash on a road with a group or something like that. So Saturdays were a little easier, but in the summers as they age, especially youth trips, you know, there are some things that happen, camps or whatever they go to that they got out of school. Very common for us on vacation to do some schooling there, usually just like a little math and a little reading, you know, like
we would be gone 2 to 3
weeks.
we'd
be gone a couple of weeks. So it was not you know, just a weekend thing. So there's the game. And certain holidays, you know, we started giving a little time off spring break, certainly around Christmas, etc., to be with their friends and to feel a little bit normal in it. Hey, I want to back up. So I got another example real quick on this Snarky 14-year-old, estrogen poisoned 14-year-old. Someone takes her chair in the living room during morning time. She loses it and lets everyone know that it's her chair. She always sits there. I'm telling you, the emotions course will address all this, but here's what goes on. She has rules in her head about how life works, like it's her chair. You know, maybe it's her chair. You know, this is behavior that is controlling, but she's controlling because she has rules in her head about how things should go. In that event, I'd call that out. Where do you get the rule? Where's this rule that it should be, it's your chair? It's only your chair, and anytime you want it. This is like the rules of toddlers, if you've ever seen it. You know, what's mine is mine and what yours is mine, unless it's broken, then it's yours. There's a list of them. So getting those rules out in the open, because rules are kind of made up and they create problems about how people should be and how life should be. And if you want to read some of this, you can find the writings of like Epictetus or Marcus Aurelius that'll kind of address some of this. But she can prefer things and like it, but this rule game is where the problem is. And you want to ask, here's what I would ask: where in the universe is it written that that's your chair? Where did God write that down? Where did we write it down? Where did the family agree? Where did they put it in the U.S. Constitution? Where did you get the idea that there's a rule that is your chair? Because that's not the game. The game is you can use that chair if you're sitting in it, unless one of the adults say, get out of it, So it's a matter of getting those rules and converting them into preferences. I wish you weren't in my chair is very different than it's my chair and you should be in it. I wish I was sitting in that chair is much better. That makes you sane. The rules, the shoulds, must, have tos, makes you crazy. All right, we got time for a couple more. Let's see. I have an 11-year-old boy that is a deep thinker. When he gets stuck in math, he gets angry. We're on the same topic because it should be easy for him. Likely a little bit of a fixed mindset too, emotional and full of anger. He will convince himself he can't, so he gets stuck and just gets stuck. So you might want to pick up Dweck's book on fixed mindset and read about that stuff, because what he needs to learn to do is be a learner. Now, smart kids, we had one like this, is really smart, pretty quick, and smart kids can get into a problem. I mean, good IQ, because they think everything should be easy, and it's not. Well, we taught the kids, here would be one of our phrases: everything's hard before it's easy, and then it's easy once you know how. And so you have to back off and you go back, and he does get it. And again, with someone like this, I'd say, okay, you can do this lesson tomorrow. We're just going to keep going over it until you learn it, because you can get it. You didn't get it. It was hard. You worked through your frustration. You learned it. You made progress. That's the progress of learning. But again, if somebody's getting upset, he's got rules about how it should go. And his rule is this should be easy. And if it's not, he thinks it says something about him. And it doesn't. It just says that he hadn't learned it yet, basically. Anything to add?
Oh, I was just one day, one of ours, I told her, I said, honey, come in here. He's been working on this problem for like an hour. He needed us to physically tell him to stand up, go away, go do something else, and come back to this. He had gotten in such a focus on this problem, this math problem, and wasn't getting anywhere with it. And so I don't know, that just came to my mind.
And with him, he's hyper conscientious. So he just wouldn't give up on it, and he needed to get away, let his brain reboot and come back to it. He's also the one that was in there hollering and shouting at the math book when he started doing calculus, because it didn't make sense. He said, these Saxon people are so stupid. This isn't how you should teach it, because he was having a hard time understanding it. So he and I got out all the books, and we figured out how many problems he had solved over the years in Saxon. And it came out to about 29,000, because any ones he missed, he had to fix, and if you don't have your kids fix the problems that they miss, they're not learning math. Just a side note. So 29,000, I said, 29,000 problems you've done right in Saxon. You've gotten to this point. And then suddenly Saxon is an idiot. And he went, okay, and never heard another thing. And he made a perfect SAT math score and majored in economics and mathematics at the University of Texas in Austin. So sometimes these things work out. Education, let me just add, getting educated,
I'm getting Dweck's book to show him,
is all about two things. It's always about curiosity. I'm talking about learning, curiosity and frustration. It's always going to be there. Whenever you do anything, you're going to learn something new. It's going to involve curiosity. If you're motivated and you're curious, you want to know how it works, that's part of it. and it's going to be frustrating. Sorry, welcome to reality. It's totes okay to be frustrated because that's how it goes. We'd all like to just know it, Matrix, plug something in, download it. I know jujitsu, but not how it works. Sorry, gang. I own the emotions course. Carol Dweck, the mindset.
It's named Mindset, I believe.
Mindset. Yeah, you
Yeah.
can find Dweck is spelled
Yeah.
D-W-E-C-K, I think. I'm pretty sure I own the emotions course. I'll look into it. I think these talks are good, approaching issues straightforward, logical, calm way. Yeah, well, it's real calm because they're not my kids. That's all I can offer. Anyway, y'all, this has been fun. Please subscribe to the YouTube channel if you're not, because it'll update you on other stuff we might put out there. And share this with your friends. Share it on Facebook. Throw it online if you find this helpful. There are a lot of folks we'd like to help. This is sort of a ministry thing that we do, just because having 5 kids and all we've gone through and what we've learned, in this little book. If you don't have it, you might want to look at getting a copy of it, The Independent Homeschool. So I go through all this crazy stuff about how it works. But if you have the emotions course, start on it. Go through it. I promise you, it'll change your life.
And as I'm just going to put a plug in, the emotion course, but all of the courses, they're for kids up to 90. The emotions course, I've gone through it with several ladies. It's good for everybody.
Yeah. Most common thing I hear from people, both on writing and emotions, are, oh my gosh, this has helped my writing. And the emotions course, gosh, I wish I'd learned this 20 years ago. And I just think, aren't you glad you didn't learn it 20 years from now? So it makes a huge difference. Anyway, it was great. It was fun. And look forward to seeing you next Friday.